Tabasco sent me like a bejeweled Tabasco that says fit for a king from the smoothie when they put Tabasco in that smoothie. So that's like the one thing I have from Kendall.
We sell our swaps when the market opens. We get our bonuses, our investors get their profits. We get 30 cents on the dollar. It's not bad.
We're 3 times that.
Not if there's no market left to sell them in.
I went like 10 rounds with that movie. You go in for Hamlet, and then you go in for Fortinbras, and then you go in for, you know, the Spear Carrier #2. And after maybe 5 or 6 auditions, I made a tape for these 2 guys who were named after the colors of their shirts, maroon and black. And I remember thinking like, which is a better part? I mean, maybe maroon is a better part, you know. And then I got the call that it wasn't going to go any further with maroon shirt guy. Finally, after a few months and I had let it go, I found out that another actor had dropped out of the part of Vinny, which nobody saw me as because I'm very different from him. You know in Monty Python, you ever see the Knights Who Say Knee? Like the guy he has like one limb cut off one at a time. And so by the end of it, I was like a bloody stump. But then I went in for Vinny, and then that happened. It did sort of change my life. It kind of changed everything. There's a Wallace Stevens poem where he writes, after the final no, there comes a yes. And on that yes, the future world depends. And that was the yes for me. Vinny Daniel he's kind of like, I saw him as a blue-collar guy in a white-collar job. He has a strong ethical core. He had a mistrust of elite institutions, and I think a desire to expose and punish dishonesty and criminality. He had a real strong ethical core and a sense of fiduciary obligation to his clients, but he was a skeptic in life that I think is what maybe allowed him to see what other people couldn't see. All these guys were sort of outliers, and they saw, you know, the cracks in the floor that people weren't seeing, and made this bet. It's kind of this story of terminal stages of capitalism that we maybe find ourselves in, and this sort of rotten foundation, faulty foundation that our housing market was built on, that had a domino effect on the world economy.
Mark, you there?
But at least we're going to see some of them go to jail. Right? I mean, they're going to have to break up the banks.
You know, I went to spend time with him at his fund on Madison Avenue and spent time on trading floors. And, you know, part of that is also, part of your job as an actor is to gain, like, domain expertise on whatever you're doing. So to learn about the world, to gain a kind of, as much as you can, a mastery of the world. So in that case, it was the financial world and understanding that world. And everything I did in the movie is just whatever I got from him. You kind of absorb it by osmosis, and you know, I recorded him and was trying to channel what I felt was his essence, even though he's like 6'3" and, you know, big kind of domineering guy.
Is anybody jumping off the buildings yet?
Why would they? Subprime mortgage bond prices are up.
What?
Bennett wants 1.9 million more in collateral by close.
Ven is asking us to post collateral.
What the hell is going on?
We don't know. But Deutsche is on the phone demanding payment.
I still don't really know what subprime mortgages and collateralized debt obligations and, you know, all those things are. But Adam McKay and Charles Randolph, who wrote the script, and Michael Lewis, who wrote the book that it's all based on, found a way to make it understandable to the masses and exciting even. You know, Adam has that ability to make something really sing that could otherwise just be like really dense material.
Sorry, Dad, I'm kind of in the middle of, do I need to lawyer all this?
It's housekeeping.
You know, that experience was so big There was 7 years of my life. Part of me I was thinking about doing this and I was like, I don't even know what to say about it. You know, it's like, I don't have words for it. But I was driving here today and I realized that even New York City has become a kind of emotional archaeological site for me. Like I drove past on the way here, the boat that we shot the episode of Logan's death on that boat, like a 32-minute take.
Is he gone?
And then I drove past the helipad that we were always taking off from. And then I drove past the bottom of the city where the very last day of shooting, I end up on a bench, tried to go in the water. You know, it's like Waystar headquarters was right here at 7 World Trade. It's all kind of present for me still in a way, although it feels like another lifetime ago. We made 39 episodes, so it's like making 20 movies. The canvas, you know, from the very first day of filming, where I was doing a Beastie Boys rap in the back of a car,
brownstones, water towers, trees, skyscrapers,
to the last day of filming on that bench and at the bottom of the city, like a kind of astonishing amount in between. The car crash, and we were filming in Eastnor Castle in England, the sort of Manchurian Candidate, Broken Spirit of season 2, the boat in Croatia, and the press conference at the end.
His reign ends.
The rap in Scotland, the parking lot where he said, I'm blown into a million pieces. It's staggering to me that I even did that, you know, because I don't remember most of it. It's like a blackout. You do get lost in it, and something takes possession of you, something takes over. It takes hold of you and you go somewhere, and I don't really understand where you go or how you go there. And then you come to, and it's like you're waking up from a dream. The painter Cy Twombly talked about painting as an active trance, and I always related to that. I fully recognize that that's one of the great characters I'll ever get to play in my life. His journey to hell and back, really. And the kind of oceanic size of his needs.
It's gonna be epic.
Of his pain, of his yearning. Jesse Armstrong and what he was able to write over the course of those 4 seasons, it's just incredible to me. And it took me beyond myself. Like, if I thought this is as far as I can go, then all of a sudden you get a script that says, no, you have to go further. At the end of the first season, the character after the night of the car crash where the waiter is killed, in the script he wakes up and he hears on this old Roberts radio this John Berryman poem. There sat down a thing once on Henry's heart, so heavy that after 1,000 years weeping sleepless, Henry could not make good. I guess for me those 7 years were about the remit of that. For me, was to try to let something sit that heavily on my heart and then try to get out from under it. So that's what I think about when I think about Succession. But it's gone now, you know, it's gone. You're using your aspects of yourself, your pain, your shame, your rage, your gargantuan yearning, all those things, and you're giving it to the writing. I've let it go, I'll never let it go. Certainly each one of these things, each one of these roles we're talking about has probably changed me and given me something and taken me somewhere I otherwise never would have gone to. Jesse and I would talk a lot about scripts and story, and I would always give notes when I felt they were, you know, I had strong convictions. I always have strong convictions about a character. And by that time, after so many years and seasons, I felt like I had authority on who this person is, respectfully so. But, you know, ultimately, Jesse's the arbiter of those decisions. I remember feeling like that, what happened in that boardroom, I am the eldest boy, that scene. I'm the eldest boy! Was like an extinction level event for this guy. Because it was just all over after that. The one thing, you know, his father sat him down at the Candy Kitchen in Bridgehampton when he was, I think, 9 years old and said, you're gonna You're going to have this. You're going to do this with your life. And so that was his just singularity of purpose and wanting. And so to have that denied from him, finally, was like abandon hope, all ye who enter here kind of moment. I think there was nothing to live for after that, because he'd already lost his ex-wife, he'd lost his kids, he'd turned down the chance for a life with Naomi to go to Hydra. He'd lost his siblings, he'd lost his mother, his father was dead, and he's an addict.
When they came to you to offer an opportunity to play this role again, would you?
No, because that would feel like a stunt or something, There's plenty of shows or movies that I would love to see people come back and do again. And I miss working with all those guys, They're all such great actors, and we all grew a lot together. Despite whatever the noise in the world is around whatever dramas we had, like I love those guys, and I miss working with them. And I miss a lot about that character. Yeah. But also, I remember feeling like I'm watching my peers get to go from one thing to another, and I'm doing this same thing. So that allowed me to go deeper in an almost novelistic way, but I was ready for it to be over. Also, I felt like there was no change left in my pockets. Like it was all left on the field, everything that character could have gone through, he went through. And it was time to call it.
I do not eat bagels from Blue fucking Bell, Molly, because these are poor people bagels.
I remember going to Chrome Hearts and getting all these jewelry and bracelets and hats and everything, and reading that book, The Game. It's like he's almost a kind of embodiment of toxic masculinity before Andrew Tate, before the manosphere. To me, it was about creating this kind of toxic masculine character who's a real estate developer, who's a hustler, and who had this game at the Viper Room that, he created and brought all these really high profile people to. That's my first movie with Aaron Sorkin, who's, like Steven, one of the all-time greats. With him, you're working on a Beethoven score. I'm all for breaking free of the writing, ad-libbing, going off-road, all of that. But with Aaron, you often don't need to because it's written so well. It's like Tony Kushner. Tony's the same way, and he wrote Lincoln. Some of these great writers, they've done so much of the work for you. You just have to follow the trail of the writing, and the writing, in a way, acts like a set of magnets that just pulls out of you whatever it needs. Now, you have to do a lot of work to prepare the character and to walk onto that set, fully formed.
You're a business savant.
I've read every piece of paper in your office.
You're making thousands in tips every week. Why do you care about $450
Because I don't want to
a week?
pick up your dry cleaning for free.
Well, you don't have bargaining power here.
I remember in the book, Molly wrote about how all these people who were so successful, and there were some movie stars in the game, and some really high net worth people in the game, that they had no jugular to their day-to-day lives. So that's what they needed in the game, was a feeling of stakes and a feeling of jugular. And the character was a volatile, erratic asshole.
People around here understand that when I say no, that's the end of the debate. I'm not 2 years out of a dorm room anymore, Charlie. Look around.
The first movie is about the creation of Facebook and how Facebook became Facebook. This movie is about what has Facebook become. And I would say that they're kind of companion pieces in a way, more than a sequel. I mean, listen, if Facebook were a country, it would be the largest population on Earth by far, almost 4 billion people across the Meta platform, so that's half of humankind. We can't overstate the importance and the power that Mark Zuckerberg has. My job is to understand the dramatic circumstances that the character is in at the time of the story. That's it, really. My job is to become him, but also to have a felt understanding of these frontline decisions that he's having to make. It's a movie about a very intentional person and the unintentional consequences of connecting the whole world. He built these tools that allowed, at this point, 4 billion people to connect, that democratized voice, that allowed for the rapid dissemination of information, that allowed for peer-to-peer connectivity, allowed all these things, which then we've seen the ways that they have been used, abused, exploited. My task was to kind of create like a longitudinal record of everything Mark was experiencing in those years. 2017 New Yorker essay profile, Can Mark Zuckerberg fix Facebook before it breaks democracy? That's what was at stake. That's the feeling of what's at stake. For me, there's a ton of source material, everything from every single one of his own posts on Facebook from the beginning, smoking meats, everything. At the point of our story, he is facing scrutiny. They're under investigation by the DOJ, the SEC, the FBI, and the FTC. So that's the kind of crucible of pressure that the character is in. By 2019, 100 billion pieces of information across the platform per day. So the scale of this thing is just unprecedented in human history. His task, which I had to try to, again, understand, I'm not weighing in my personal judgment here, is to balance, on the one hand, free expression and safety.
I'm a free speech absolutist. I'm not the one who's lying, and I'm not stopping them from seeing someone who is.
Having to defend what he believes is the goodness of humanity in aggregate and the overall social good of the platforms in the face of being besieged and embattled on every side. And in this case, it's the Facebook papers published by the Wall Street Journal. This one was scary. It's scary even talking about it to you, honestly, because the stakes feel very high. It's very real. We all have strong feelings about these issues, about the mental health effects and the mental health impacts on, especially on teenagers. The movie addresses all of it and really, speaks to what are, I think, some of the most defining issues of our time.
Secretary Stanton is sent over to tell you that as of half an hour ago, the shelling of Wilmington Harbor has commenced.
The first time I saw Daniel as Lincoln, we were in Virginia. Rick Carter, Stevens' production designer, had recreated the White House incredibly on a soundstage, like down to the wallpaper. And I was standing on the second floor where the bedrooms are with David Strathairn, and we saw this stovepipe hat coming up the other end of the hall. And then we saw him, and David turned to me and looked at me and said, "Spirits walk." And it was like that. I got chills. I get chills now saying it. I didn't have a big part. Every minute I got to be in that room, it was a masterclass. I had been Daniel's assistant on a movie in my early 20s. So then I got to kind of reprise this role of his assistant in this movie. And a lot of the given circumstances, which is a feeling of devotion to this person and a desire to protect them and shield them from the demands around them, which is what John Nicolay, who I play, they called him Cerberus at the gates. He was somebody who was there to kind of be a bodyguard and protect Lincoln because Lincoln was trying to save the Union. And so it was, I had to bring my devotion and also just read widely about the American Civil War. That's also for me the greatest joy, is like the research. You get to be a student of a new world, and it takes you into this world. You fill yourself up with all this new understanding, and then you hope that that becomes the reservoir that informs the work you're going to do.
Abolishing slavery by constitutional provision settles the fate for all coming time.
One of the things that's so amazing about Stephen, he comes to work every day with what I imagine is the same childlike sense of wonder and peril that he might have felt as a beginner. Picasso had to work his whole life to draw with apparent simplicity that dove, or just something that is apparently simple. So with Stephen, I think you're just witnessing that kind of miraculous level of creativity that is informed by decades of mastery.
Mrs. Lincoln's waiting in the carriage. She wants me to remind you of the hour and that you'll have to pick up Miss Harris and Major Rathbone.
Daniel, that was the first time I was really watching somebody in the room give a performance where you don't see the stitching, you don't see the work, you just see a fully embodied, you saw President Lincoln. But it's like watching Philip Petit walk on the high wire across the Twin Towers. So that was just like utterly thrilling for me.
You're a strong man, not a boy, okay? I need you to look after your brother for me. Now, can you do that? Okay.
Okay, Dad.
That was the biggest job I had gotten by a mile. It was like a land ho moment for me, having been in a wilderness for a long time. And the kind of character work that I've always wanted to do. I've always, my heroes are these chameleonic actors who disappear into their characters. And to me, that's the Holy Grail. You're kind of searching for something, you don't know what it is that you're searching for. You're waiting for something to click. And you have to become like a detective and just investigate everywhere you possibly can. So I spent a lot of time at some schools. In LA, there was a school called the Help Group in Sherman Oaks. I spent a lot of time with young people with autism. And then I met a certain kid who worked in the cafeteria there. And then it kind of fell into place for me, and he and I became fairly close. It wasn't at the end of the day like an impersonation of him, but there was something there that unlocked the character for me.
Oh, this is St. Francis I picked, because he was her favorite. Friend to the birds, like Mom. Oh, gotta remember to put food out for them, especially in the winter.
I really loved that character. And also for me, that was a chance to work with some great actors. We filmed in Boston, Robert Downey Jr., Robert Duvall, who we just lost. And yeah, what a gift that was, and we had fun making it. Sorry. We were all kind of sitting at the feet of Duvall because we all had such reverence for him. He was always saying, return to zero, start from zero. He liked to say, don't push and you'll be rewarded around the corner. So if there's any young actors watching this, those are two real magic beans, I think.
Like maybe St. Joseph, because he's the patron saint of fathers, and it's the St. Joseph.
All right, dial down the crazy now. Dial it down.
And
the challenge of going like way the fuck out on a limb for me with that character, because they're in like a naturalistic drama. They're in like, Long Day's Journey into Night or something. And I had to kind of thread a needle of a character who's a little bit tilted and not quite in the same world as them, but try to make it grounded. And I felt a responsibility to the people who I had spent time with and to what I had come to learn about that particular experience and struggle. Yeah, it was a huge challenge for me. The stakes were very high. It was a big studio movie. It was the first time I'd had like a supporting lead in a studio movie. Your responsibility, I think, is to the character and to their experience and their struggle. So I was playing somebody in that movie who is pretty straitjacketed, who is not free, who carries around a Super 8 camera as a kind of security blanket. You know, the world is a very fraught place for him. He needs to do things to self-soothe, and the perseverative behaviors are his way of feeling safe. That's where I'm living in a visceral way. That's just, for whatever reason, the way I need to do it, which is, it's the only way that I can believe in what I'm doing. And ultimately, that's the primary thing, is for me to believe in it. So whatever I need to do, whatever it takes for me to believe, see the world through this person's eyes, that's all that I'm there to do. There's a thing in mathematics called proof by construction, where basically you have this theorem, you have this idea, and you can only prove it by doing it. That was certainly the case with Dale Palmer. I don't know what this is gonna be. I don't know how this is gonna come out of me. I'm gonna interrogate this world as much as I can, learn as much as I can, find some people who can be a template for me in terms of character, and then I'm just gonna trust my instincts and follow them out on the limb. But it certainly was the first time I had done that in that way, at that level. Good morning to you, good morning to you. One of my favorite directors, James Gray. And yeah, the character is his father, based on his father, but essentially it is his father. And it's his story. It's sort of a ghost story of his past. You know, James was resistant at first to giving me any access at all to his actual father. He didn't want it to be an impersonation or just something mimetic or, and of course I don't want that either. Whatever I'm gonna do, if it's based on someone real, I need it to have a basis in truth. I need to find that kind of anchoring point. That was really a matter of like finding a way by hook or crook to getting access to James and his family, and as much as I could absorb, and he described the character in the script as a Jewish Stanley Kowalski with a PhD.
You study something you can fall back on, like computer graphics. Now that's a growth industry.
There was a lot that I got from the writing alone, especially this idea of a boiler repairman, somebody who, like, this feeling that the boiler was so pressurized and at any moment might blow, like the pressure of a boiler. I was living in Denmark. I got on a plane. I met James and his family. He took me to the panorama at the Queen's Museum that Robert Moses built, incredible scale model of New York City that his father used to take him to. I remember thinking, I had this idea of having him answer the questions for the Proust questionnaire as his father first, which was a way of indirectly understanding more about his father. And then after that, he let me do it with his father. So I ended up having a kind of whole, hours of a kind of psychological profile of his dad. And that became, for me, the basis of everything I did. I loved making that movie. I love that movie. It's about our moral failures as people, as parents. It's about our kind of passive complicity in injustice and our passive complicity in racial injustice. I think James made a pretty fearless movie. It's not a flattering portrait of a family. He's really showing you the truth, and he's showing you that love and harm can come from the same place. This father is trying to help his kids survive in what he sees as a dog-eat-dog world. The first drawer they put in was so loose that I tapped on it and it fell down. So we had to cut because the scene doesn't work. The scene is about me trying to break down the door and then getting inside. And then the second take, they fastened the door so securely. I started the scene, I started trying to break down the door, and it wouldn't budge. And a lot of directors at that point would call cut. That's what most directors, I think, would do. But I didn't hear cut. So then you have to keep going. So then I started throwing myself at the door, trying to kick it down. I'm kind of losing my mind with rage at this point, yelling at the kid to open up.
Open it up!
And it's kind of building and building. And then I remembered that the house we were in had a basement, and in the basement was a toolbox. So I went all the way downstairs, and the camera's inside the bathroom still rolling. And I came back upstairs, and it's like a few minutes into a take at this point, and he still hasn't cut. And then I just like demolished the door and broke it down, and it unleashed a violence, and and that's what's in the movie.
Come here! Stop!
You want to touch the third rail when you're working. So that was just an example of almost a kind of Cassavetes-like way of working with James that I loved and felt so grateful for, and he's somebody that I want to keep working with, for the rest of my life.
The game is rigged, and I want to take care of you and your brother. That's why.
Listen to what he's telling you.
I am listening.
Tony Hopkins is, what can you even say? I had been a PA on a movie that Steven made called Amistad when I was a teenager, like in the sound department holding a boom mic, just because I didn't come from a family that had anything to do with any of this, and I wanted to get near it and watch and learn. So I remember watching Anthony Hopkins. He played John Quincy Adams in that movie. And I remember watching him give this speech to the Supreme Court. And each take was like written in water, so free, so in command. And and then almost 30 years later, I was doing a film with him. So that was really meaningful to me.
Tomorrow we go into court and we get ourselves arrested.
We're already arrested.
Is Bill talking to you about taking the stand? Because some of the press guys are saying Bill's been talking to you about taking the stand.
The Trial of Chicago 7 was my second film with Aaron, Haskell Wexler's documentary Medium Cool, which is in Grant Park in that summer of 1968. It was scary, and it was like a totalitarian police state happening in Chicago. Jerry Rubin was, he was notorious. He was a trickster, he was a prankster. He believed in what he called the politics of ecstasy. So for me, it was also a tonic, living in and inhabiting all these really heavy parts. Jerry was like high all the time. He went in front of HUAC dressed as Santa Claus. He announced in Daly Plaza a 150-pound pig called Pegasus to run for president.
Take off the robes, please. Silence!
He was making a mockery of things because he thought our justice system and the war in Vietnam was a mockery of justice, was a travesty of justice. And he was there to defy the system. So I also had to let that live in me and be a bit of a live wire in that sense. And I'm taunting the judge, who was played by Frank Langella, everything done within the bounds of respect. But, you're trying to find where it lives and then let it live. Noisemakers, and I remember Aaron calling cut once. He was pretty frustrated with me. He said, cut, one more without the cowbell, please, Jeremy. I think I felt like if I wasn't being held in contempt of movie court a little bit, then I wasn't doing my job.
No matter what happens, no matter what they say about you, no matter how beaten you are, you claim victory and never admit defeat. Never admit defeat.
Roy Cohn was kind of a heartbreaking character for me. Even though I don't agree with just about anything he ever said or did, I felt like my job was to find the humanity in him. That's always your job, really. It's not to judge, it's to find the humanity. But you have to come from a place of understanding, which is not the same as endorsement, but I do think you have to understand them as best you can. He was a closeted homosexual at a time where you couldn't be openly gay and practice law. So he had to kind of stamp out and kill a part of himself, which led to a kind of nihilism that he then turned against the world. And that's a tragedy, I think. That's part of his tragedy. And on the AIDS quilt, The 3 words for him are bully, coward, victim. And I think they're all true.
He'll be convinced when he reads about it in the Times, okay?
Well,
you create your own reality.
It's not that easy.
Truth is a malleable thing.
I think you can't overstate the influence of Roy Cohn on our world, his shadow on our world today. So it was a huge challenge for me to become him. He's both monstrous and childlike. He's like part demonic Peter Pan, part Lost Boy, part Iago. He had a collection of frogs in his bedroom. He was eccentric, he was gleeful, and he was absolutely vicious and brutal. His aggression, his use of misinformation, it's encoded in everything that our president does. He and Donald Trump talked on the phone 10 times a day for years. They were very close. In a way, Roy was just discarded when he got sick.
I have liver cancer, which incompatible.
I almost didn't do it. I remember a friend of mine saying to me, "What would you do if you weren't afraid?" And then I said yes, because it just felt like it's been done before by a lot of great actors. It felt like such a risk, but then also you want to run towards the danger. And Sebastian is incredible in that movie. And we work together really well and easily. We're both, I think, pretty immersed in what we're doing. It was a short shoot. We shot in Toronto. You know, we were on our feet all day, every day. And, you know, I think it's a horror story, that movie. It's like a cautionary tale, the way that some of these other movies are a cautionary tale. Roy's legacy is really a legacy of denial. It's like the denial of the truth, denial of his own truth. And denialism is something that I think we're seeing more and more in our world. Roy Cohn, you know, as an actor, that role was like a banquet. And as a human being, it was like staring into the heart of darkness.
For me.
It's your birthday.
Oh, well, you didn't have to do that, Donald.
Come on. 59, but who's counting? Huh? Tiffany diamonds.
The fake Tiffany cufflinks was something that wasn't in the script originally, but I fought for it to be in there because I really thought that was, first of all, just an amazing historical anecdote, because that is true. You know, they were apprised later by Roy's lover. They were fake. To me, The Apprentice is a movie about friendship, ultimately. It's not a political polemic. It's like Midnight Cowboy. And that's what Sebastian and I were trying to make. And we reference Midnight Cowboy a lot.
Whether or not you believe in this particular album, in this office, my office, we believe in Bruce Springsteen.
John Landau is, you know, such a character. And so a lot of the work was about getting to know John. He was a famous rock critic, founding rock critic of Rolling Stone. He wrote an article that said, "I've seen rock and roll's future, and its name is Bruce Springsteen." And it was kind of the shot heard around the world that changed his trajectory and Bruce's trajectory. And John has been, you know, the Lewis to Bruce's Clark on this 50-year journey. And he's been the steady hand and a guide and, in a way, an architect of Bruce's musical expression, especially in the early years where this movie takes place. And, you know, they both said, this ain't a job, this ain't a business, this is a reason to live. That's how they feel about music. That's how I feel about acting. A lot of that was in place for me already. When you start to unfurl the miraculous body of work that is Bruce Springsteen's body of work, it's very easy to want to devote your life to supporting that person and to helping them realize their vision. I remember first time going to see Bruce play in a field in Denmark. I was watching John watch the concert from the sound booth. It was almost like 80% of the information, the emotional information that I needed to play the role, I got that very first night watching John watch him, because he's seen him thousands of times. passion that he feels for their ongoing project is not diminished, and it's really beautiful. Their relationship is beautiful. They're like brothers. And that movie was about that brotherhood to me. It was about this friendship.
Where you come from is gone. And where you thought you were going to was never there.
There's a scene in that movie that I really love. John goes to Bruce's house in Colts Neck, New Jersey, where he's about to go off on this road trip. And John can sense that something is wrong and that there's been a darkening in Bruce's spirit, and he's listened to the demos for Nebraska, and he feels like his friend is not okay. And there was a scripted scene where they sort of said those things out loud to each other. But knowing them the way I'd gotten to know them, it felt like maybe it wouldn't be so overt. So I texted Bruce and John the night before the scene, and I had read in one of the biographies, or maybe in David Remnick's article, that Bruce and John used to play records for each other like all night long. That's their love language. That's the way they communicate. And so I thought maybe John should just put on a record instead of saying anything. He should just play him a song. And I kind of pitched that idea to Bruce, and he started sending me ideas for a song, and it was like 10 o'clock, 11 o'clock at night, the night before we shot the scene. And none of them were quite right. And then I texted him saying, what song would you play if you wanted to save your friend's life? And then he sent me this idea of Sam Cooke and the Soul Stirrers, The Last Mile of the Way. And I put it on. It was just immediately clear that that's what it needed to be. So emotionally huge. And it's about going through a dark valley before you reach the promised land. So the next day we shot the scene as scripted, but then I'd had the props department prepare a cassette, and I asked the director and Jeremy if I could just try something.
Let's just listen.
And put that song on, and that ended up being what's in the movie, but it felt spiritual in a way that John and Bruce's relationship is spiritual, and Bruce's music is spiritual. To me, that is like the Goldilocks place, where this medium is a collaborative medium, where you are walking a razor's edge and making discoveries that are alive. That's the juice. Bruce once said the real question is, how deeply can you inhabit your song? And that's what you're trying to do as an actor. You're trying to inhabit each song as deeply as you can, whether that song is Jerry Rubin or Kendall Roy or Mark Zuckerberg, or Vinny Daniel, or any of these things we're talking about. Somehow I've found myself working on things that are right at the axis of our historical moment and the zeitgeist, and I find that exciting, and I feel very fortunate to be getting to do these parts.